I think there should be a rule that if you're that good, you can't do upgrades for the next season. Like
you have to go with the car that you've got.
Yeah, you have to go with the same car, and then go from there.
The conflict for me is, even though he's had a bad season, he's still finished second.
Yeah, I know.
From that reason alone, I don't think anyone can berate him that much. Hey guys, this is On Track GP. I'm Jamie Chambers. I'm joined by Matisse and I'm joined by Talia. Hi guys.
Pleasure. Hello.
And this is our end of season review for the Formula One season 2023. So what do you guys think? How did it go this year?
That's a great question.
That's a great question. I think for the entertainment side of things, I think it could have been better for sure. We could have had a race at the front. We could have had a title race. We could have had some sort of competition in the drivers and the constructors. We didn't have that. But I think maybe if this was the handing over the baton to next season, I think it does set itself up really nicely because there's such a battle going on in second place. You don't know who's going to really prosper over the upgrades and get themselves into a position to maybe contend. So there's a lot going on behind Red Bull. So
yeah, I actually agree with that. It kind of sets up next season, but obviously that doesn't change how this season went. I think we kind of saw quite early on how the season was going. But then I guess, the takeaway was that Carlos Sainz wasn't he the only other driver that wasn't Red Bull to end up getting a podium? So, I mean, if anything...
Get a win.
To get the win. But if anything, that's something. But yeah, it was an interesting season.
It's interesting in terms of like talking about entertainment value. I think it's had the most mixed up pack we've had for a while. If we remove Verstappen from the equation for a lot of it, there was actually a lot of good racing from the midfield up.
Yeah.
Haas can't be counted in that for obvious reasons.
No.
But
they did all right.
It's good qualifying sometimes, Valkenburg, but yeah.
One lap wonder. I think it has, like you say, passed on the baton a little bit. It's quite ominous in terms of the fact that Red Bull stopped doing development on the RB19 in July, and have been doing the RB20 since then.
They should be banned from doing upgrades, to be honest.
It's interesting.
I think there should be a rule that if you're that good, you can't do upgrades for the next season. Like you have to
go with the car that you've got.
Yeah, you have to go with the same car, and then we'll go from there.
We'll talk about Red Bull first, just very briefly, because I think it's been talked to death at this point about it. Max Verstappen, 19 out of 22.
I mean,
quite insane, really.
That's a stat.
Perez at the start of the season, you remember, was looking like he was actually going to mount a challenge.
Yeah, I remember.
And I was thinking, go on, Checo. Like this might be our Rosberg Hamilton moment where Checo really says, "Okay, I've helped you out in Abu Dhabi. I've been a great teammate. I've been a fantastic defender when you've needed me to play that role in second. But now I'm actually going to go for the title, and I'm going to show that not only am I worth being in this car, but I can actually, go, back and forth with you." But that didn't last very long.
No, it didn't. Somewhere along the line, it just became a slippery slope. And
do you think the two races that he took meant that he had to live up to an expectation that made it more difficult for himself?
Yeah, almost actually. I think because we had such high expectations of him at the very beginning of the season, and we all thought, "Wow, okay, here we go," and then he literally fell off.
Because the Mexican Grand Prix is a perfect example of that. Obviously, we watched it live. They're having to push so hard that instead of just taking the race as it came and knowing that your car is the same machinery as Max, so it should perform the same. And then it was his own sort of internal thought process rather than just taking the race as it came.
But the thing is as well, like, I get it with the pressure because obviously Max is a generational driver. Winning titles and winning races is difficult from, to lead from the front and have to get everything spot on and everybody's behind you, chasing you down. That might be overwhelming. But to not be second on the podium consistently throughout the season in that car, and to be not qualifying for Q3 so many times and to be struggling to overtake and be in the middle of the field just with that car just wasn't on. So he's one of those drivers that I think this season's been a really bad season for him. And if it wasn't for Max being so consistent, maybe Red Bull in the constructors would have had more of a wobble. That could happen next year if he doesn't, rise to the occasion. So I think he got away with a bit this year, Checo.
The conflict for me is, even though he's had a bad season, he's still finished second.
Yeah, I know.
From that reason alone, I don't think anyone can berate him that much. If he had a complete capitulation where he wasn't finishing consistently, not scoring points consistently, and yet he still outscored Hamilton. He still contributed massively to Red Bull points tally. Granted, Max would have won the constructors on his own.
Yeah.
But I think that says more about the fact that we have a Formula One in general has a slanted point system that doesn't quite work. It's too much if you win, especially if you win a race and a sprint.
Yeah, sprint.
You
you're taking away
do
33
hear that a lot
points.
more nowadays, that the points are so drastically big that, you know, the winner obviously gets the point, but they are so big that sometimes the leader just goes way too far ahead. And that's obviously what happened with Max this season.
Yeah, and he's taking the fastest laps.
Yeah, well, he took a load of Chellums again this year, which is quite. I mean, 6 hat tricks this year with fastest laps, race, lead every lap, and take pole. It's just absolutely insane.
That's insane. Yeah.
Last thing on Perez, what's he got to do going into 2024?
I think he has to take less pressure off himself, because I think that's what we were talking about. When you put too much pressure on yourself, you don't always end up, you know, succeeding, or not even succeeding, but just doing well, or coming out, you know, with something good. And I think that's the thing, is he's put way too much pressure on himself, and I think everyone else puts too much pressure on him. I think he almost just needs to, I know it's hard to say, just relax a little bit, but kind of go into the races being like, but I am still an amazing driver, and I have got this. I don't have to, you know, okay, if 1 or 2 at the beginning I'm not, you know, beating up, you know, coming up to Max's, you know, where he is at his levels, it's still okay.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about McLaren and Aston Martin in a second, but on that point, is Perez a better driver in a Mercedes, an Aston Martin, or a McLaren?
Potentially, because I think that Red Bull car, people have been saying, it obviously suits Max really well. So maybe driving style, it's not completely geared towards Checo. Maybe if he went to another team where he was maybe the lead driver, then they would obviously gear it more to him. And the pressure wouldn't be so much. So maybe he'd drive with a bit more freedom, a bit more fun, and then, you know, perform a lot better. I think Checo, he is a very good driver, because I remember when he was potentially going out of Formula One, I was like, what is going on?
And then
like, how
actually got saved by Red Bull.
And I was like, how can he not have a seat? He was brilliant the season before. So yeah, I think there is a chance, but at the same time, the whole point of Formula One is to do well at those middle range teams to get to a top team and then deliver again. If you're gonna have to fall back, then it might get to a, I don't know, Danny Rick situation where you're just dropping down the paddock. You don't want to do that.
And then you coming back up again.
And that's adding the pressure again for Checo.
Yeah, different type of pressure, you know.
So we'll talk about the rise of McLaren and Aston Martin. Both of them, for different reasons, were surprises this year. What were the highlights and lowlights for, firstly, McLaren?
They shared the season, didn't they?
Yeah.
Almost. Aston Martin took the first half.
Yeah, Aston Martin dominated the beginning of the year, and then they just like disappeared.
100%. I think Aston Martin, they could still look back on this season with a lot of pride, because they just 100%. Came out of nowhere, really. I know they invested a lot, and there was a lot of talk about how much money they're putting into it with Stroll and whatnot. But in terms of them just turning up first race, and they're challenging for podiums, and Alonso's consistently putting on the podium. And I remember Stroll came in with a wrist injury, so he couldn't maybe put
and actually drove better with a wrist injury.
Probably, yeah.
Hey, he did all...
Oh yeah, are you a Stroll?
Hey, yeah.
Sorry, we've got a Strolly here.
Yeah, I actually do. I don't mind Lance
Got a few coming in now.
I've always been very open. He has performed all right the last few races also.
Yeah.
I mean, wouldn't he get 4th or something, or 5th? Was it? It was his highest.
Yeah, no, he did have a good.
The upgrades were downgrades, I would say,
100%.
from the middle of the season onwards.
Yeah.
People were generally talking about Alonso being in discussions for top 3 finishes every single race, and it's what they did to the car as opposed to what the drivers did, for me, that affected Aston Martin. Whereas McLaren, exact opposite thing. Nowhere first few races of the season, upgrades come in, suddenly Oscar and Lando are actually pushing Red Bull.
I'm really happy with McLaren, obviously.
Yeah, I can see that.
So yeah, someone's changed allegiances just for the end of the season.
Was that, I'm not going to wear a Christmas jumper, I'm going to still be in my McLaren shirt.
I'm used to it now. But McLaren, they've got such a good driver lineup, and Oscar Piastri, to do that in his rookie season is just insane. Like, he's so talented. He was clearly the best rookie on the grid, but also he's in the best car. But the way he just delivered and really did push Lando, and Lando had to keep proving that he was the lead driver, the more experienced driver at this level, because there was a few times that Piastri really pushed him. And of course he won a sprint as well, which Lando hasn't won a race yet, which still absolutely bamboozles me.
Over 100 races without a win now.
Yeah, I think next season he'll definitely get one.
I mean, there has been some hubris in there. He has had opportunities. I mean, we only have to look back only one season, pouring rain, staying out on dry tyres. That's a huge thing where Lando, you probably could have had your win there. Also, do you think he feels a bit put out by the fact that Oscar's come in that strong?
I think he did, especially when Oscar won the sprint. I think that was the turning point, maybe, where Lando was probably a bit like, okay, I have a competitor here. So I think that was probably the turning point.
Are McLaren and Aston Martin going to be in the discussion for top of the table next year?
I'd like them to be.
Yeah, I think I think McLaren, they should be, because they've ended the season so well. If they can build on what they've got, then you'd expect them to be right up there again, almost the favourites to be challenging Red Bull the way they've ended the season. With Aston Martin, it's tough because they've fallen away. Like, they started so strong and just fell really down into the midfield. It's really tough to see where their trajectory is next, but I'm sure they'll improve. But it's just everybody else is also improving. So, Alpine were shocked by their arrival, so it could go left.
I know it really matters, obviously, about what you're doing to your car, etc. But they can see as well, Aston Martin, that if they get the car right, they can see they're going to win things.
Yeah,
they did it at the beginning of the season, so they just, I think, these next month or next few months, they're really going to have to hone in on making sure this car is right.
I mean, in terms of the amount of podiums between Red Bull, Ferrari, Mercedes, Aston Martin, and then McLaren, take Red Bull out of the equation, there's a fair share between those teams.
Yeah.
McLaren are on the rise, and for a pedigree team like McLaren, it's good to see that. I mean, I'd like to see the same for Williams, that we'll come on to in a minute, where prestige teams now, their pedigree should come through, and you should see them come back to the top. It's quite sad when you see the McLarens and the Williams of these world just underperform so badly.
Yeah.
So talking of that, Mercedes and Ferrari. So Mercedes secured P2 on the last race of the season, despite Charles Leclerc's best efforts.
Yeah.
Who had the better season, Mercedes or Ferrari?
Well, definitely Mercedes.
Yes.
Definitely Mercedes.
Yeah.
I love Ferrari, though.
You got to back that comment up.
Yeah, I have to, because with Mercedes, I mean, if you're not winning, it's not good enough at Mercedes, especially after the amount of domination they've come from in previous years, with Hamilton, obviously, and Rosberg, and then Bottas. So to be in this position is not really good enough at Mercedes, and they do need to kind of prove that they can put this together in terms of start a season with a competent car, because it's either porpoising or the car's just coming in absolute mess at the start of the season. Hamilton's complaining about back problems and all these things. So I feel like I can't really judge George or Hamilton properly right now, because that car is just, sometimes it shows little signs of revival and then it just capitulates and falls to the floor. And I know they're both good drivers. Hamilton obviously has been searching for that last title, which I think will not only signify the end of his Formula One career, I think he'll end on a high if he gets it, but also it kind of just puts him on that pedestal above.
Well, we've seen a lot of great drivers where they've had domination and then they've had to take a season or two. Michael Schumacher's example with that, where someone else comes in, they dominate in a different car that does something different. Red Bull is a perfect example of this. Now everyone seems to be copying the Red Bull way, as it were. But this is the first year without a Mercedes win in a decade.
They threw it away, though.
Yeah.
But this is the thing. The other drivers, there are really competent drivers around. That's the thing on the grid, and they are slowly getting better. And obviously, we talk about Ferrari. Obviously, everyone went in with a lot of high hopes, especially for Charles Leclerc. And obviously, we all know how that went. So yes, Mercedes obviously had a better season, but the thing is, overall on the grid, so there's a fantastic set of drivers there. And I think that's the thing with Lewis Hamilton, is he knows that everyone's only getting better, and that's kind of where it's going to go.
So Ferrari then.
Would you prefer, I guess, as a fan, I'd prefer to take a race win than P2.
Yes.
In the constructors.
I think Singapore,
100%.
it sticks out like a sore thumb, more for Christian Horner than anyone else, really. But certainly in terms of the one time when a racetrack was the sort of massive key difference between the teams. No one was really prepared for how Singapore was going to play out. And Ferrari took full advantage of that. And does that put Carlos Sainz ahead of Charles Leclerc in that sense?
Well, this has been the kind of a debate this season as well, hasn't it? Which one is the, in inverted commas, first driver and second driver? I think it's still, if they say it, I think it's still quite obvious that I think Charles Leclerc maybe just nabs first. It just that you can just see it, but I think Carlos Sainz, he really battles him.
I mean, if we look in the early 2000s and some of the driver combinations that Ferrari have had, so Schumacher Massa, Schumacher Barrichello, Ferrari seem to have not been able to bring a driver 1-2 back in the way that they had that in the golden era for them. Vettel is a key example of that, and then Vettel with Charles Leclerc, and now Carlos Sainz and Leclerc. Do they need to, not so much impose team orders, but do they need to pick a driver and go with it?
I think it's tough because they're so flawed in so many different areas. Like
do we need to bring up their pit stops?
But
my heart's like breaking.
Your club team's doing well, so your Formula One team.
Yeah, they are.
Well. That's how it works. But
Arsenal top of the league.
it's either like pit stops or it's strategy errors and not making the right decision. Sometimes just not making any sense. I think it was at the last race where we was just like why are you staying out? Why have you not pitted? Why have you not come in? And they've just gone long, and then they've put on the same tires, and then they still need to put on a second compound, and you're just like, what? Why are you being so basic right now? Just do your basics, as Joe says, just do the basics right.
Well, we quite literally saw the drivers taking the strategy into their own hands at the last race of the season, which is quite insane to have Carlos and Charles talk to each other via their engineers to try and work out their own strategy.
Yeah.
Do you think that Fred Vasseur is going to be a big difference for them going into 2024?
I would hope so. I think at this point they've changed teams of principal already as well before coming into, was it this season they came in?
Last season.
Last season with a new principal. So something's got to click for them, because I think if it does, they've already shown they've got the pace, especially in qualifying. They've been putting up some serious times. Leclerc's got fantastic qualifying speed. He's been able to put it on pole a few times, but you just know when Ferrari are leading from pole in a race, they're not going to finish off the job. It's almost like
that's what's really sad, is that everyone knows it doesn't matter if they get first in qualifiers. Everyone kind of sits there and like, it's fine, they won't end up first tomorrow. And that's really sad that we sit there and we say that, but there has just been something missing the entire season. And I just can't put my finger on what exactly it was.
And that kind of is highlighted with Mercedes just pipping them to the post as well.
But there was something missing with them all season as
definitely.
well.
A car.
And even I think strategy also, because I think when Mercedes in a few races showed they had some pace to go up against Red Bull, they bottled it.
Yeah, Texas is a prime example of that, and Mexico as well. They're competing for the win there, and then the race after they just drop off. And I mean, for Hamilton especially, to have that kind of drop off for a driver of his caliber, that is huge. And he's questioning: is it him? Is it the car? A lot of the time, but from Mercedes, I think it has to be the car, and with Ferrari, I think it's strategy.
But you would think it's you especially if you're somebody that's won 7 titles already, you would sit back and think there must be me in this somewhere. But again, it's a whole thing with mindset, and I'm sure he's been told enough times it's not you, and he probably knows confidently it's not. But you do, especially as you get older. I mean, I say that Fernando Alonso's the oldest on the grid, and he we saw what he did this season. So I don't necessarily think it matters with age, but maybe as he gets on a little bit more, and obviously the younger drivers are coming in, you do kind of sit back and think, okay, maybe something isn't clicking with me now.
Yeah, no, I can agree with that. We're going to touch on AlphaTauri as probably best of the rest, given Alpine. Alpine did all right. I'll say that.
Yeah, did all right.
They were neither here nor there. Haas and Williams had a better season. But AlphaTauri, the biggest talking point was before 10 races, Nick de Vries has already gone. Do you think that's a bit harsh? Do you think a rookie should be given more time?
I don't know. It's a really difficult one. It is a really difficult one, because at the end of the day, you're here to win, aren't you? You're here to win races, and if someone's not performing, it's like you should be giving them a little bit more time. But then again, 10, it's still a decent amount of races.
Yeah.
He's a lot older as well than most rookies, so I think that didn't play in his.
And he was coming through with a lot of caliber as well. Yeah, being a champion, you expect a lot more.
Coming from Formula E, wasn't he? Yeah, and it's like the thing is with him is there's no longevity. There's no process with him. It's like where you can say, okay, you're really quite a young driver, you've got this level of potential, we're going to really invest in you and go season in, season out. But with him, it was kind of like, you're experienced, you're coming here to get results. You don't get those results, then we could literally find a younger talented driver and pursue
or Danny Ricciardo.
Or Danny Rick.
Or younger talented.
It doesn't help when Danny Rick, a former race winner, is sitting in reserve driver for Red Bull with a lot of
he's just hovering around.
But also marketable. He's really marketable as well. He's massive personality, so that's going to help the AlphaTauri team as well. So
do you think he was treated more harsh purely because he's older, or was it performances as well? Because you look at Logan Sargent, a younger rookie.
How old is he? Sorry, do you know exactly?
Sargent, 22.
Sargent's younger. He's 21, 22.
De Vries is 28.
De Vries is 28.
Yeah, no, De Vries, okay.
So with that in mind, has Logan Sargent, given the point he only got 1 point this season, did he get treated harsher? Or do you think Sargent was given benefit of the doubt?
Do you think age is playing a number in this?
Hugely.
So you think because he's 28,
I think Logan
it's
Sargent being the younger
know how to deal with
rookie.
this goodbye.
I think it's a combination of that and the fact that Red Bull have they had Daniel Ricciardo right there. Like, it was such an easy thing to just do that. You're not going to win that battle with Danny Rick, because if he's motivated again and he wants to return to the sport, you know the level that he could potentially get to is a lot more inspiring and a lot more optimistic than De Vries, who's not really driven in F1 apart from that.
And there's an irony to it as well, with Liam Lawson now again sitting off track and Logan Sargent.
Yeah,
Liam Lawson came in fantastically consistent performances while Danny Rick is injured.
Yeah,
my personal opinion was Danny Rick wasn't back long enough to warrant that seat. Lawson could have kept that for the rest of the season. And I'm a Red Bull fanboy. It's fair to
but
say.
I think the thing is, once Danny Rick's in there, they're not going to take him out again.
Yeah,
I wanted Liam Lawson to almost get that seat for next season, because I would have been a bit more excited long term about what he could do, but it was never going to happen when they've just put Ricciardo in. He's got injured, you can't really take him out.
There's a certain amount of irony to it as well, because no one's talking about Yuki Tsunoda, and he scored 17 points this year.
Yeah, I'm really happy for him.
Really consistent, great across the board. He had some sort of unfavourable comparisons when he came in, that he was very slow, like the next E-Day for a while, and it's like he's shown he's a very good performer and consistent. Do you think he gets overshadowed by the fact that there's so much turmoil in terms of changing team name, partner driver?
Yeah, I reckon it is. It's overshadowed by everything else that's going on in the team. Really.
So
I'm really happy for him though, and I mentioned him a lot this season, because I think from a personality standpoint, he's really grown up. Like, he used to be swearing and cussing on radio
massively
all the time, and he was so erratic and so emotional when he was driving, and he couldn't seem to keep calm. If he made a mistake, or if something went wrong, like a slow pit stop or something, which is going to happen in that level of team, he would just implode for the rest of the race and just start being erratic.
He was a bit of a grumpy driver.
Yeah. Whereas this season, I felt, because he knew he was the lead driver and he had a rookie come in as well, he was like, well, not a rookie, he was obviously there's some test races, but he was like, I've got to be the lead driver. I've got to be the mature one. I've got to take on this responsibility. This is my team now. And then he was getting, it was an on-running joke. He was starting to really get those 11ths constantly, and he wouldn't get a point, but then he started to get some. So yeah, I think he's kicked on a lot.
Nice. Best race of the season for you guys?
Oh,
Best race of the season. Am I allowed to say the Ferrari win?
Of course, yeah. Of course.
I'm a Ferrari
Singapore
fan.
for Talia.
I would probably agree with you, because I don't want to see Red Bull winning. So Vegas was strong as well, considering it was the first race, and considering in practice there was potholes or whatever was going on the track.
It was a water manhole cover. That I actually saw the damage that it did to Carlos Sainz's car, and to damage a monocoque like that, because that's the strongest, hardest part of the car, and this manhole cover has ripped through it, is quite insane. I think for me, best race of the season was either Brazil, really, just because the racing was absolutely fantastic, and Mexico thoroughly enjoyed. Vegas for me was spectacle over race. I will find the stats for this, but it's the only race where the car cools down on the straights, which for Formula One is just no good.
Oh, God.
I think they've done better than having a car park, which is immediately a win for Las Vegas. But I think there needs to be something changed to that track. It doesn't quite work as yet.
But not just that. When you think of it as a fan, in a media side of things, I mean, I don't know how much you two were looking through your social media the weekend of Vegas, but my God, it was unstoppable. I mean, you would laugh at anything that came up. People were, unfortunately, ripping in to the race in every kind of way possible. And I know it happens in every race in different ways, but it was non-stop the whole weekend. And that almost isn't the best sign, I think. When you think, I mean, it's great for us because we all sit on our phones laughing, but it's not when you think of it as a race.
I'm a bit of a purist. I love Hockenheim, Spa, those sort of races, classic Formula One tracks. I just don't feel... Vegas felt half-cooked for me. Like, a lot of the media hype was done really, really well. And, we'll go around the sphere and then we'll go down the strip. Okay, great. But that doesn't make a good track. It's essentially a glorified square. I mean, there was comparisons to it looking like a pig, which is unfortunate. I think something needs to change. They need to make the actual track more interesting in and of itself. And
that straight is way too long.
Yeah. But then with the cars the way they are now, street races potentially aren't the way forward anymore.
But they don't all love the street races, do they?
The cars are too wide for Monaco. Baku's quite difficult for overtaking, and then we get to Las Vegas where you've got huge straights where you just get a DRS train. So I think we need to look at more like South Africa has a ready-made actual racetrack.
That's what I want.
That's something. South
Africa. This is what Hamilton's been banging on about. He said he's not retiring until they get their track. I think
100%.
For Formula One to be a world sport and to be covering the world in terms
you need
of
to touch that continent.
You've got to go on that continent. It's just you have to.
Massively.
So I want to see that track.
It wouldn't be right to have an F1 discussion without bringing up Lance Stroll.
Yes.
Talia's way too happy. He started the season really strong. He unfavorably compared to Fernando Alonso. And then on top of that, went off a cliff towards the end of the season. What next for him and his place at Aston Martin?
I think he knows that he can drive. I know everyone probably, they don't love him. He's not the biggest, fan for everybody, but he can drive when he does, perform. I think being, the driver behind Fernando Alonso also, I think, puts a lot of pressure on you.
Hugely.
Just in general. And then especially, I guess, when your father, owns the team, there's just a lot of pressure on him. I do understand that. But when he can get in a car, he can drive. And look, hopefully there is something that does perform next season, because we did see it this season.
Yeah. I think the fact that he's had world championship winning partners consistently, like Vettel and Fernando Alonso as your teammates.
Yeah.
I mean, I think only Lewis Hamilton has come out better in terms of having championship winning teammates.
Yeah.
So hopefully. Any drivers that you want to see anything special from next year?
I'd like to see Charles Leclerc win. Please.
For me, Hamilton, of course, I need a race win minimum. And I need a title fight as well, just in general, from anyone.
For me, I want to see more from Joe Guan Yu, Oscar Piastri, and George Russell. I think George, again, he fell off a cliff towards the end of the season as well. And much like having a strong teammate, trying to overwork it, overcompete instead of finish the race.
I'm looking at Perez, of course, if we're talking about who I need to see more from.
And Lando. I want to see Lando.
Sorry, second in the championship, Perez.
Yeah, that's pretty enough.
Yes. With the context of what I saw, yes, 100%.
But no, do you know what? I want to see Lando win a race as well. And I actually do also want to see Fernando Alonso on the podium again. But more because he loves it when he's on there. I mean, they all do, but there's something that he really loves.
I think hopefully 2024... with the cars being developed and with the changes looking towards 2026, this year and next year are sort of a mixed bag. So I think having the pack closer together, more changes on the podium, and someone closer to Red Bull, ideally.
Anyone.
So we're going to wrap it up there. That's been On Track GP's end of season discussion. Matisse, Talia, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I've been Jamie Chambers, and we'll see you on the next one.